Okay, sounds good.
Good, good, good. And I usually let it go for a couple of minutes, and this is really meant for us to share thoughts and ideas that we may or may not see people. This is a Facebook and a YouTube on CNY Fertility live. So, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Rob Kiltz, owner director of CNY Fertility Centers, and today we have a very special guest, Melissa Brisman, reproductive possibilities, and talking about surrogacy in general, and specific questions that you may have regarding gestational carriers and surrogacy and laws and ways to facilitate the process. So welcome, Melissa, and thank you very much for joining me.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. We have worked with you for a long time, and it's great to be able to say hello to everyone and give them a little information. So I'll give you a little introduction. My name is Melissa Brisman. My company is Reproductive Possibilities. Pretty easy to find us. You put in Melissa Brisman. There's not too many Reproductive Possibilities, or the law firm will pop up. Today we're going to talk about surrogacy. We have an agency that basically will find you a surrogate, do all the legal work, get you with your baby, help you take the baby home, get the birth certificate, social security card. And we also can, if you have a surrogate already, we can also guide you through the process and tell you what needs to be done depending on where the surrogate lives, if it's a family member, the state laws. So usually I give a little bit of information about the process. Dr. Kiltz, you want me to give a little information, or you want to talk a little bit about the medical?
Well, I think it really the medical part is really kind of the simple part, because we do frozen embryo transfers so often, which is our standard when it comes to a surrogate or gestational carrier. But maybe you can tell a little bit about the process, because and why a lawyer, or why reproductive possibilities? Why not just get your neighbor or your friend and use them as a carrier and not do any contracts? Talk about some specifics.
Sure.
That side, because I think that would be very helpful for everyone.
Sure. So first of all, lawyers usually are not your friends. A lot of times people use lawyers for divorces and litigation. So they get the idea that I'm going to go to a lawyer and it's going to be, thousands and thousands of dollars, and I'm going to be bankrupt and I'm not going to get anything out of it. But when it comes to surrogacy, first of all, whether you're using your family member, friend, or we're finding the carrier, you want to make sure that your contract is legal and everything is done properly, because that will ensure that when the baby is born, you'll get your name on the birth certificate and you'll be able to take custody and add the baby to your insurance, and the state laws will be very important. So, for instance, one of the first things that I do when somebody comes to me, if they already have a carrier, I want to see, is it in a state where, number one, you can compensate the carrier? So up until February 16th, you wouldn't be able to pay your carrier without risking a felony in New York. Now it's legal to do so. Louisiana, definitely want to stay away. You can't pay carriers in Louisiana or Michigan. So I want to look at, the law. I want to look at the health insurance. Believe it or not, in some states, it is legal to exclude a surrogate pregnancy from a health insurance. And now the CPT codes have been changed as of, I think it's 2019. And there is a selection for IVF pregnancy, egg donor pregnancy, gestational carrier pregnancy. So if the OB is honest and checks gestational carrier pregnancy and it's excluded, and you have a multiple birth, which is sometimes common in a IVF, you could be looking at $100,000 bill when your lawyer for a few $100 could have told you, hey, it's open enrollment, get this Blue Cross policy, it doesn't have an exclusion. So it's very important. There's a lot of legal rules that people don't know about in a surrogacy.
So cost of the process?
Sure, absolutely, definitely. So believe it or not, and I'll tell you that some people go through a gestational carrier arrangement and spend $2,000, and some people spend $150. So I'll tell you the ranges. First of all, believe it or not, some companies are now becoming more and more common. They will pay for surrogacy or part of it. So you really want to ask your employer. I'll give you some examples. LinkedIn, Google, Pfizer, the Bloomberg, some hospitals, most drug companies, banks, any kind of investment bank, regular bank. A lot of them are giving money towards a surrogacy. Some of them give a lot. For instance, McKinsey and Company, I've seen them give up to $200,000 to employees. So, and that's for not health insurance, that's a benefit. So you want to look at that. Number two, if you have, depending on what you're going to, I'm going to tell you the cost without the IVF, okay? Yeah. Because that's going to be different. But the average carrier is going to get paid $35,000 in the United States for a single fetus, right? So if you're starting there and you need to compensate your carrier, you're looking at $35,000 for that. And then you have to budget about $15,000 for her expenses, like buying her health insurance policy if she doesn't have it, travel, maternity clothes, co-pays. Now, this is where you could save the most money. You go to an agency, you're going to spend $20,000 to find the carrier, do all the legal work, guide the process. If you are on a budget, you can definitely just spend less, but you don't want to do it poorly, right? So like I always tell people, if you need to save the agency fee and just spend a few thousand on the legal work, there's nothing wrong with that. But we don't want to find a carrier who I want you still to do a background check on your carrier, right? Like we can't just take her word for it that she's never, if you don't know her, that she's never committed a crime, that she doesn't have DWIs. I want Dr. Kiltz to look at her medical records. Just because she tells me she never delivered a baby early doesn't mean that's true, right? Hopefully it's true, but I want her to have a psychological exam. In fact, I just had a patient today that the arrangement fell apart because the intended parent had one view of what contact was going to be like after birth, and the carrier had another view. Like the carrier wanted to be lifelong friends, and the client really just wanted to send a picture. So all of these can be done at a cheaper price, but you have to make sure that you don't skimp on the screening, right? Because what will happen is you'll show up to Dr. Kiltz and then they won't follow medical directions, right? If they're not screened properly.
So essentially connecting with your company can be the first stop for those interested in a gestational carrier surrogacy program. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, because we also give free consults. They're about an hour and a half. And then we go over the different, things that you could have. But also through our website, you could get all the costs for free. Like they're not hidden. We won't say come in and you have to. The first call to the office, you're going to get a cost sheet because the one thing that we can't do is we can't make the carriers get less money, right? So you're talking a minimum if you're doing a paid carrier without doing anything else is about, $50,000 just for the carrier. So if you know somebody, you will save a lot of money, but you want to make sure that person really wants to do it because the hardest is family. You want family member only if they want to say yes, right? Because I don't want them. I've been doing this 21 years and all I do is surrogacy. So I once had a sister not show up to the transfer, right? Because she didn't know how to tell her sister no. And so instead of doing the mature thing and telling her in the beginning that she couldn't do it, she went through the whole process and then didn't show up to the transfer, which obviously is more hurtful, but wasn't on purpose. But I think in this particular case, the psychologist probably would have picked up on it. They waived the psychological exam.
So if you bring in your sister, friend, or anyone you choose, it's still the very best to come through the agency where all the particulars need to be taken care of. It can be taken care of properly, and quite commonly they'll be taken care of in a better way in order to negate those things where the sister didn't.
Yeah, and if they bring somebody, it's much, much cheaper. Like it's just a few thousand to do those checks if they bring somebody through the process, right? Because my biggest fear is that you're going to go and find somebody. There's nothing wrong with finding somebody any way you find them, right? Like I have a client who has a mother like my mother who talks to everybody she ever sees, like in the street. So she found her daughter a carrier in the supermarket, right? Because this mother really wanted her daughter to have a carrier. And actually the carrier was great. So it's not where you find the carrier that's the issue, right? It's, is she qualified? Is she doing it for the right reasons? Does Dr. Kiltz think she has a good uterus, right? Good BMI and things like that. So it's really the process that we're going to go over with you more so than who finds the carrier.
What about a donor from out of the country? I'm sorry, a carrier from out of the country. Do you help with that also?
Yes, but we only can help if, as far as the legal process goes, if they're going to give birth here, right?
Okay.
If they're going to give birth outside the country, there's not much that we can do because we don't have any jurisdiction in other countries except for Canada. We do work with lawyers in Canada when the birth is going to be in Canada. But if you're going to come here just for the transfer and go back to be pregnant, you certainly can call us. I know lawyers in lots of other countries. We work with lawyers in England and Japan and China. So we certainly can direct you, but we could give you a referral, but we wouldn't be the one doing the work. Now, the thing about bringing somebody here from another country is you need to, one, make sure that they're here to deliver, right? So they have to be here. I'd like to have them here at least at 25 weeks. That's just my preference, point of viability. They're here. And the second thing is we need to make sure that we have some way that they're getting good medical care, and there are different kinds of insurance that we can buy them when they come over for the delivery, so you're not paying for everything out of pocket. So we want to make sure that, especially in a pandemic, I kind of prefer them to be here the whole time, but I know that that's not always realistic.
And Mexico and Eastern Europe, do you work with anyone in Mexico for these sort of things? Is it something that we're capable of doing? Because I know there's been some talk about shipping embryos out of the country to be transferred into someone someplace else. I mean, that's one option that people are looking towards, but really what we're talking about is gestational carriers in the United States that are facilitated by almost all states. And what are the states that do not currently allow?
So Michigan and Louisiana are states that are really hard. Now you can do it in some other states, but like for instance, Wyoming isn't the best place. It only has 600,000 people, so I'm not too worried about getting carriers from Wyoming. We have, believe it or not, had carriers in both Alaska and Hawaii, and it's worked out okay. But I don't usually like to work with carriers from Alaska and Hawaii unless the parents are living there or it's a relative, because it's first in Alaska, it's hard to get in and out during the winter because their temperatures can go really, really low. So sometimes in certain areas the planes don't fly, and in this one area that we had a carrier, actually births had to be in a certain city where she had to be housed because doctors didn't go out because it was so cold during the winter. So you have certain things that aren't favorable. But in our particular case, the husband of this carrier got stationed in Alaska for some project, and they had to go. But in that case, the military did cover their delivery. So,
and what's the frame for finding a carrier in general? From, hey, we need this person. How long does it usually take?
Usually it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months to find a carrier. Sometimes it could be quicker, depending on what someone's looking for. So let's say you came to me and you told me that you're very flexible. They can live anywhere. I don't need them to be near Dr. Kiltz's office. I am okay. I don't care about race or religion, or my embryos are PGS tested. I don't care if they abort. You'll find somebody right away. But usually what I find is that people are putting all their hopes and dreams and they become very specific, right? So I always like to tell them a little longer because they usually will tell me they will take anybody, but that's not really true, right? So depending on the person, some people do. I had a client from London who flew in from London and said, just give me anyone you like. And a year later, she wound up with 2 healthy babies.
Wow. So move fast, right?
Yeah, but that's very unusual, right? Because I always tell you, if it's a few months more, but it makes you more comfortable because the person is closer, or maybe they have their own health insurance. Like when your kid is 18, is it going to really matter that you waited 4 more months? Like, don't just pick somebody to pick them, because if you don't like them, it's about a year process and you're going to have to deal with that person for a long time. So it's not like when they're pregnant, I can fire them.
Let me just stop for a moment, Melissa, and thank you to everyone for joining us. Dr. Rob Kiltz, Melissa Brisman is here talking about surrogacy. We're going to be answering some questions, but mostly we're going to be focusing on surrogacy, sort of a special event tonight, since I'm usually on Thursdays at 4 and Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern time. But I'm really grateful for Melissa, who's been a reproductive attorney for
Since 96, too long. You can see all my hair's getting gray.
Oh, you look beautiful. Well, mine is gray, so
Yeah.
and certainly way back when. Tell me a brief. How'd you get into this business? And as
So, in 1998, my twins were born from a carrier. It was the first. It was the first one in a hospital at Boston IVF that they did. And my doctor, who actually just retired, Merle Berger, I was his first case, and I was working at a law firm just out of law school, and he just kept calling me and saying, I have another person who wants to do this. I have another person that wants to do this. I have another person that wants to do this. And then it just eventually, that's all I was doing was surrogates. And it got very busy, and it started to spread. When I had my agency opened, I think in 1999, I opened the agency, but I was just doing law firm work before that. I think we only had 20 births. Right now, we have probably 100 just pregnant, and we have more than that born every year. And it's incredibly popular because so when I first started doing this, we didn't even have email, right? Because I remember thinking that I want to be able to get in touch with my carrier, and she doesn't have a cell phone, and she doesn't necessarily listen every day because she's not a crazy New Yorker listening every day to her voicemails, right? But now word travels very fast, right? You could just have these Facebook Lives and information. The information highway is much greater. So you can have somebody who looks up Dr. Kiltz, who lives on a potato farm in Idaho, have a baby, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas, when I was doing this in 1996, there's no way that NBC News is putting on a special about this. And so nobody's getting the information. So I think these are great because it helps your everyday person, and it's not just celebrities. That's also a big misnomer. People come and they think, oh, your whole practice is celebrities, right? That's a one-off, right, for a celebrity to come. And mostly they're everyday people. I mean, celebrities come like everybody else. They have fertility problems too, but they certainly don't make up the majority of your clientele.
And we're all everyday people in some way or another. But a quick hi to Lily from Georgia and Marcy. We'll see if we can get you some help on that. And Oni, yes, we need to be translating this into Spanish, maybe French and other languages. I'm working on that. Sherlyn, hi, and Kelly, give me a chance to go over that in a minute, and Jennifer. But Stacey Ann has a question. Do you recommend intended parents from New York look for a surrogate who is in state or out of state? Melissa, can you help with that?
Yeah, so the new Child Parent Security Act will govern for any surrogates giving birth in New York. And if you're on any kind of budget, I would tell you, and the person is being compensated. Okay, so this is not for your sisters or friends. I would say you prefer not to get a surrogate from New York. So this is a little complicated, but I'll dummy it down into the 2-minute answer. So there's something in the New York law called the Surrogate Bill of Rights. So basically, every clinic in this new licensing requirement and every attorney has to give this Surrogate Bill of Rights to New York surrogates. That entitles them for the intended parents to pay post-birth a year of health insurance, life insurance, lost wages, and mental health counseling. So that could add up to be a lot of money, right? So if the person has their own health insurance that's paid for by their company, and you're just buying the life insurance and their mental health counseling is covered by insurance, you're not talking about a lot of money, but it could be, right? So the other thing about New York contracts, and this is the only state in which this is true, is that they have full control over certain things without penalty. So New York states they have full control over any decisions that involve their body, the surrogate, and that if they violate the contract in any way, but it's their body, there's no penalty. So for instance, if they agree to have a C-section, if the baby's life is at risk and they change their mind and the baby dies and they're fine, they still get paid. If they have control over the number of embryos, the right to abort, the hospital that they go to, the attorney that they use. So New York has this Bill of Rights that gives them complete control over their body. Now, in every other state, they do have complete control over their body, but you can put a penalty in. So you could say, okay, you're agreeing that if prior to 18 weeks, we find out this baby has a life-threatening illness, you will have a termination. And then you decide that you don't want to have a termination, right? Then we could stop paying you, right? We don't have to pay you for that pregnancy. In New York, can't do that. That is not allowed to be in the contract. She still gets paid in full. So for New York, for some people say, I trust the surrogate. She was screened well. I don't think she's going to disobey the contract. And I can tell you, I've been doing this for so long. I have never had a carrier try to harm a baby, refuse a C-section, refuse to abort a baby. They like kids. They're healthy. Those are unusual. But the law isn't as favorable in New York. It's very favored for the surrogate.
So finding a compensated surrogate outside of the state that comes here for a transfer and goes back to their state to deliver in a favorable contract may be better in more compensated cases than as the surrogate.
What I tell my clients is that unless you're super laid back, right? If you don't care about the little bit of extra money, you have to be a very relaxed person to pick a New York surrogate, right? And I have a client right now using a New York compensated surrogate. The surrogate actually lives in Albany. She's a nurse. She's wonderful. I have no doubt she's going to do what she says. She's got her own insurance through work. But the clients are super laid back, right? They're not worried she's going to, if you are like me, lawyers are type A, and you are going to worry every night if she is going to breach the contract, even though she probably won't, I'm going to tell you, look, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, don't make yourself crazy, right?
Does that apply to compensated surrogates?
Yes, it's only compensated surrogates. Uncompensated surrogates in New York can waive all of these provisions, but not the abortion and the control over their body. They can waive all the monetary provisions. If they're uncompensated, you don't have to pay for their life insurance, health insurance, those kinds of things. But surrogates in New York who deliver in New York always have control over their body without penalty. But if they're uncompensated, what would be the penalty anyway? That's the same in every, right? There's no penalty.
So, but the rules paying for health insurance and life insurance and things like that don't apply to the uncompensated surrogate.
Yes, they don't apply. Okay. They don't apply. You're correct.
All right. We had another question from Sherlyn. Thanks for joining us, Sherlyn. Best age should we find a carrier? Should it be someone who is younger, or does that not matter? I guess I can talk on the medical side of it. Certainly in the reproductive years is better. Someone who's had a history of a pregnancy also, and a healthy pregnancy is better. Minimal risk factors, certainly. But getting into the 40s and certainly beyond. But we have had a mom carry a baby who was 64 when she carried and did quite well. So, but that's not the norm in all this. Do you have any what are your criteria in looking for a surrogate, Melissa?
So when we have a compensated person, we like to see them under 42. But I've had several moms reach into the 50s. We like to see single embryo transfers in people who are, over 45 because the risk to the heart, but we don't really have any control over that. That's really the clinic's choice. But we wouldn't find you a compensated person that was, like if you had a carrier, used her and she was 42 and you wanted to come back and use her again and she was 44 and the doctor said, okay, we wouldn't have an issue with it. But in general, 42, 43 is the highest that we're looking for compensated carriers.
Elizabeth tells us that Maine is a great place for surrogacy. Do you have any comments on that, Melissa?
It is true. Maine is a great state. Basically on the East Coast, you're really fine in most states, but depends on your situation. For instance, Tennessee, if you have an egg donor, not the best state. You have to adopt your baby, right? Florida, Utah, Texas require you to be married to enter into an enforceable surrogacy agreement, right? So each state has a little bit of a nuance, but Maine is a very good state. And, when you're looking for compensated people, a lot of times people who are married and, live in the more rural areas are a little bit more easygoing than maybe somebody like me who's from the city, and they just take the medication easier. They're a little bit more relaxed about the process, and it's always good to have a relaxed person as a surrogate because normally the parents are pretty nervous.
Sure. Let's see. I've got a question. I'm trying to Bel Air. A married couple have embryos and the woman dies for whatever reason. Legally, husband who's still alive, new girlfriend carry the embryos left. Where does that stand legally? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but that sounds like it's for a lawyer before you transfer any embryos, for sure.
Are they saying like the wife passed away and the new girlfriend's going to carry the ex-wife's embryo or something?
I think that's what it's saying.
Yeah, you can have a baby posthumously, certainly, but there are certain ways it has to be accomplished. She would have had to have left those embryos to her husband through the will and followed the state laws. So, for instance, a lot of times when people are at a clinic, they sign a consent that says, if I die, I want my embryos to go to my husband, but some will say I don't, like they want them destroyed. And I actually had a case exactly like that, where the wife died of cancer, and she had banked her embryos, and the ex-husband got remarried, but he promised his wife and their parents that they would use the embryos. So when the new couple was done with their family, they actually hired a surrogate to carry the embryos, and we got permission from the court, and it was in the will. And when I got the birth order, the parents were from Israel. The grandparents flew over with the new wife and the husband to have that baby. And so, could I do it? Yes, but I can't change the documents. So if she's passed away and the documents aren't there, it will depend, right, on her wishes before she passed.
Reciprocal IVF. How does this work? Do we have to have second parent adoption? So that's an interesting one because, quite often we're doing an embryo transfer in a same-sex couple, reciprocal IVF. They're not married. I'm imagining that marriage runs in different laws, but for us, as long as both are consenting to the one retrieval, donor sperm, the embryos go into the other. But it's interesting because in the SART rules, they're labeled as a gestational carrier, which it's just reported that way. But legally, I'm imagining.
Yeah, it does depend on marriage a little bit. But in New York now, with the Child Parent Security Act, actually covers much more than just surrogacy. Most people don't know that. So now if you're an unmarried same-sex female couple doing reciprocal IVF or IVF with artificial insemination where both aren't participating, you can actually have both on the birth certificate by filing a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity, which the hospitals now have there. So you could do it and both be on the birth certificate, but there is also a mechanism now, and I actually filed my first one today. There is actually now a mechanism where if I have an unmarried same-sex couple, the court will order them as the parents. So in addition to the birth certificate, they have a parental order, which would be good in all of the states. Because even though they're both on the birth certificate, and this is more complicated for this talk, they can have problems in other states that are prejudiced. So the parental order is a court document declaring them both as parents. So New York now allows them to either do a parental order or an adoption. Married or unmarried, if they feel uneasy about it, but definitely unmarried people, even though they both can get on the birth certificate now, to protect themselves, it is pretty easy and inexpensive to file with the court. And the reason why I tell people that they do that is the only people they're protecting themselves from are each other. 50% of the United States gets divorced, right? And same-sex or heterosexual, you're not exempt from possibly having maritable problems. And if you don't have that court order, the non-birthing parent can have issues.
So really this is done before conception has begun. Some form, is there?
They have two things. One, they're at the hospital. If they're not married, they file a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity or maternity. If they're women, obviously it's maternity. But those are free forms that the hospital gives out that is new, that just came into effect February 16th. So if you're giving birth now, the hospital might be a little confused, but they are on the Department of Health website. You download them, you fill them out, you're both on the birth record. That's no issue. But if you want to solidify your parental rights, you have different things after or before the baby's born that you could file. You know, there's even forms on the website if you wanted to file them yourself. They're not that hard to file with the court to actually get a court judgment that you're both the parents.
So that's reciprocal without marriage for the protection. It's done once you're getting ready to deliver, not before you transfer an embryo.
No, not before you transfer an embryo. So when you deliver, you'll get the voluntary acknowledgement of maternity and fill it out. So for instance, let's say somebody has an affair, right? And it's not their husband that is the father. And the woman knows it's not her husband. They've been separated for 3 years. They never bothered to get divorced. So they show up at the hospital. What happens, and this is going on for years, is the woman who gives birth is on the birth record. They serve the ex-husband, the Department of Health, with a piece of paper, or not really ex because they're still married, so husband, and say, hey, did you have sex with this person? Are you the father? And he says no. And the other person says yes. Then there's no court. The birth person goes on. It's the same. You can do that now with women, whether they're married or unmarried. Now, if they're unmarried, it's easier because we don't have to serve anybody else, right?
Got it.
But if they're married, we would have to serve somebody else. Like if they were married and they were once married to a man and now they're with a woman, the paperwork could get a little complicated, but it's not hard and there's no cost to do it. Like the hospital does it for you.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Then
Well, it just came into effect February 16th for same-sex couples, and most people would have no need to know it about being married to somebody and having a baby with someone else because it's not that frequent.
But we live in is much more frequent today, and quite often because we don't ask for marriage certificates and things like that. I mean, we're here to take care of people who come to us to have a baby, and this is why, thankfully, there are lawyers to help on many of these sides. So tonight we're talking with Melissa Brisman, reproductive
possibilities.
Yes. How do we find you, Melissa?
You can find me at reproductivepossibilities.com, at melissabrisman.com, at reproductivelawyer.com. Brisman's not that common a name. The only other Melissa Brisman, unfortunately, was the Craigslist murderer. That's not me. So, I'm still alive, so you should be able to find me pretty easily.
So who should be looking you up?
Well, basically, definitely anybody who needs surrogacy, but we do a lot of other things. If you need an egg donor contract, if you need help with insurance, if you need a gestational carrier contract without the surrogate, an adoption, a birth order, our company also does escrow. So let's say you found a carrier on your own and you just wanted Reproductive Possibilities to do your escrow fund management. Like you didn't want to pay your carrier, right? Because you thought that it was unlikely. You could use us for that. If you find your carrier on your own, you can come to Reproductive Possibilities to do all the work as well. So we have what we call a bring your own carrier program so that it will be cheaper for you if you find your own carrier.
So but they're still going to be compensated. Is this something that the person who brings the carrier might determine the compensation along with that carrier, or do you kind of help with that?
We will help with that if they want, but like if they find, let's say I've had cases where somebody is using like a friend of a friend, and that person knows that these people can't afford $35,000, but they want to do it, but they want to get something, so they're going to pay her $20,000. That's fine if that's what they agreed on. That's what we're going to do, right? So they can do it that way. But if they need help negotiating the compensation, we will do that also.
You mentioned some of the hidden things that they may not know about, because some people may have come in late here, and you mentioned about health insurance for the carrier because their insurance may not cover the pregnancy. Is that correct?
Yeah. You see, the problem is that Obamacare or any care that is through an Obama plan has to by law cover maternity benefits. It's considered an essential health benefit. So they can't exclude surrogacy. And actually, Governor Cuomo about a month ago issued that New York plans can't exclude surrogates either. So New York surrogates, that is a benefit that they will be able to get insurance. But this doesn't apply to self-funded plans. So that means like if you work for AT&T or Walmart or Costco and they don't buy insurance, they have a self-funded plan, it doesn't apply, or self, and it also doesn't apply to certain small groups and things like that. So you just have to be careful that you're using the right plan. Right? You don't want to use the wrong plan. I did many years ago have somebody use a Harvard Pilgrim plan that had an exclusion, and they were sisters, and they never had any legal help whatsoever, and the post-birth bill was $52,000.
Wow. No. So they were on the hook for that, for sure.
Yeah, and they had to, I think they had to declare bankruptcy because it was so big and we couldn't get it down. And for a few $100s a month, if they had gone to an attorney, they would have been able to have a plan that didn't exclude it.
Sure, Lynn, thank you for asking another question. Family member who they want to pay $10,000 to. So going to you would help kind of finalize and create the contracts. If it's someone delivering in New York or someplace else, you can help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes family members don't want to take money and they want to give them money. So a lot of times I suggest different things. Like, for instance, maybe it's Sherlyn who wants to pay the $10,000 because she feels like, her sister should get something, and then her sister will be in the room and like, I don't want any money. This is insulting. So I usually actually suggest 529 plans because most people won't refuse money for their kids' education. So sometimes after the birth, I say, like, look, she's going to be mad at you. I negotiated with her attorney. She doesn't want to be paid for this. But so how about you put some money for, your niece and nephew for college or something that is more palatable to your sister so she doesn't feel that you're trying to pay her. So there's a lot of feelings in family that I try to negotiate.
So in general, surrogates that you find or those that come forward, what's the percentage between compensated and the uncompensated, doing it for altruistic reasons? But I'm sure in some way, even the compensated, this isn't an easy thing to carry a baby, and there's some.
No, it's not all. That's what people. So you'll see programs where some carriers will say, "Oh, I don't care about the money," and then others will say it was all, I needed the money, and it's never all of one thing. It's always a combination, right? So people always tell me, look, I've been working since 7:00 this morning. It's 7:30 where I am tonight. Like, if you told me tomorrow I'm not going to get paid, I won't do it anymore, right? But I love what I do. I have my kids this way. I feel it's very important. So a lot of the carriers, they love being a mom. They feel it's very important. They could put some extra money away for college, for a vacation they wanted, just something that they could spend on themselves. So it's a lot of times, actually, it's harder during certain times to find carriers. It's picking up again, but it was a little harder during the pandemic because people were pretty scared about being pregnant during the pandemic.
Sure. I don't even know that I could answer the question, the percentage of people that use a carrier. It's small. How do you define the difference between a carrier and a surrogate?
So technically, a gestational carrier is somebody who carries a baby that's not related to them. But New York went and made it all crazy for everybody and decided to use the term gestational surrogate. So it's either gestational carrier, gestational surrogate, and now they define what we call a traditional surrogate, meaning the woman is biologically related to the baby she carries. So it's her egg, usually artificial insemination. But there's a new term now that most of the professionals are using, and they're calling it genetic surrogacy, meaning the woman who carries it is the genetic mom. But I think it's confusing, but that's how New York refers to it, as genetic surrogacy and gestational surrogacy.
So someone's giving birth, they're actually giving the baby up for adoption?
Yeah, so in New York, genetic surrogacy or traditional surrogacy for pay is illegal. So, however, it is not like, let's say somebody's sister wants to carry the baby, right? For her sister, it's going to be her egg. her sister's husband's sperm, that is fine, but there's going to be a step parent adoption for the new mom. That is not a big deal, but I mean, it's easy to do. It's like a $2,500 thing. It's not hard. But what could happen is the woman who's giving birth could say, I want the baby, and her sister's husband could say, I want the baby, and it is possible it will be as if they divorced, and the baby will go best interest of the child support, all of that, which isn't necessarily, the best thing for people, right? It's scary. Genetic surrogacy is scary.
For everyone and anyone thinking about using a surrogate, and we talk to a lot of our patients that may benefit, the first stop is going to be talking to Melissa Brisman, her team, to get more information of all the specifics, to know what your options are as you're looking at the possibilities before you do anything. Kimberly, I think we answered this already. A non-compensated surrogate, she has her own insurance through an employer. Would that insurance pay for her pregnancy? Do we need to get her an additional insurance? You need to check with the employer and the policy. Is that right?
Yes, I always have to look at the policy, right? I have to make sure that the policy has the right information. So I also see there's somebody typing in, and I don't know if I missed this. May you speak to how compensation should be reported on your annual taxes for both the surrogate and intended parents? So I wonder if Emily over here is listening to the buzz at the IRS, because my feeling is someday we will get some guidance on this, but we don't right now.
Healthcare costs in general aren't tax deductible, or maybe they are in some cases. I don't know that answer.
They are in some cases, but it's very hard now to deduct. So when Trump was in office, they changed the standard deduction to be pretty high because they don't really want people to itemize. So I forget what the amount is, but I think you can deduct medical expenses to extent they maybe are 15% of your AGI, but they have to be medical expenses for you. So you're not going to be able to deduct the surrogate's compensation, right? That's not for you. Egg donor compensation is taxed. There is a federal tax court opinion on that. When you pay an egg donor is supposed to pay tax on that. Whether or not she does, I have no idea. But
when we pay an egg donor or a sperm donor, it's they receive a 1099. So I imagine a 1099 is supposed to be filed, but if it's individually paid, they may not be doing that. But
yes, companies send 1099s. We send 1099s to our egg donors. Carriers, it's all over the map how people think. Some surrogates report it, some don't. But I think it's extremely risky. So the funny thing is, for about a year before I started doing this, I was a tax lawyer, and it's a very risky deduction to deduct the compensation. I definitely would consult your tax advisor about that.
So everything I'm saying here, you must consult a reproductive lawyer, an accountant, a tax accountant, a lawyer, to make sure you get the proper advice. So we're just giving you some conversation about all of this. Let's see, we talked about that. There was one about genetic surrogates not be paid, but get help covering basic needs, extra food, bed rest, childcare. I mean, essentially,
you can pay them whatever they would be allowed to be paid under an adoption, which is very limited. In New York, it's pretty hard when you do an adoption. When you do an adoption, you have to file an affidavit of expenses. So everything that you pay to that person must be reported to the court. You can, I think, start paying after the 6th month, and you might be able to get them $5,000 worth of things, but you're not going to be able to get them compensation, so to speak. You could cover childcare, yes. Food they have to eat anyway. It would be pretty hard for you to be able to carry their food. Maybe you can make an argument they eat more, but I'm not sure how much more pregnant people eat, only on TV, right? Your vitamins and their copays and medical care, yes, you can pay for all of that. Somebody asked, if you have a carrier carry 2 embryos, do you have to pay more? Well, if you're getting a compensated carrier and you're talking about market rates, you usually pay them $5,000 to $10,000 more per baby they carry. But I mean, it is whatever, if you're finding the person, it is whatever you agree on, right, to pay them.
There was a question from Zandria. Hello, Zandria, on a fair price to pay for a private carrier. Well, which I guess the question is any carrier too, right? Is that right? So average?
The average is about 35,000. I do have to say that in California, let's say, like the average is much higher. Believe it or not, the average carrier in California gets $50,000 for a first time. Things are very expensive out there. But if you're finding a carrier privately, it depends. Like there are some carriers who will not expect a lot. They just want to do it. But there are some who say, I want whatever everyone else is getting. So it really will depend.
And again, thank you to Melissa for joining us tonight. We're really talking about gestational surrogacy, caring, having someone other than the intended parent carry a baby for reasons either multiple failed implantations, absent uterus for sure, significant medical issues that might prevent the woman from carrying because of risk of serious illness or death, severe fibroids, adenomyosis, Asherman's, those are to name a few. Did I miss anything that you might say stands out for you, Melissa?
No, I mean, you obviously have some people also who use a carrier because they're gay males, but
well, obviously, because of single or gay males that need a surrogate, absolutely. That's becoming more and more common. And CMI Fertility, we absolutely provide that service and care for everyone and anyone, no matter your gender, description. We are here to help, and I know that Melissa equally feels the same.
Yes, absolutely. We have a lot of gay males now. Unfortunately for gay males, it's much more expensive, right? Because they don't have any of the material that they need except for the sperm, which is pretty cheap, right? Comparatively speaking.
But you can help on the finding an egg donor, and we certainly help in the egg donation side of things. That we can, bring it all together between the surrogate and the egg donor, create the embryos, and then transfer those embryos. So
yeah, and I noticed. I noticed Andrea had a question, and she wants to know if you could use Medi-Cal in New York. If you had Medi-Cal, could you use that? So the statute, the Governor Cuomo release about paying for surrogacy doesn't apply to any Medicare, Medicaid, or Medi-Cal plans. So you have to buy a private plan. It's not for a surrogate pregnancy for a Medi-Cal plan.
Right. For any self-funded or state-funded insurance plans, they don't cover these things, nor do they cover IVF, or at least they're not mandated in New York State to cover those things, which is unfortunate because there's so many people that need that. Let's see. Trying to conceive, laparoscopic hysteroscopy, I had scar tissue removed and tube repaired. Sir, you could probably do that a month or so, Jennifer. I just wanted to throw in another question that was non-surrogacy related, but let me see what we have here. Let's see. This question is more for the doctor. See, after pre-clamp, said you suggested the patient use a carrier, or when you will still just a patient should use a carrier. So pre-clamp, so any significant medical issues might sway you, or failed implantation, or significant fibroids that can't be repaired. That's where we generally recommend to use a carrier, to name a few. And Elizabeth, my sister, got, thanks everyone for joining us, by the way, and your questions are always appreciated. Elizabeth Ferguson, hi there. Sister got $35,000 in Maine for the first time with an agency plus reimbursement for just about anything she did, an invasive procedure, 500 extra child vitamins, everything independent. Thanks for your thoughts and ideas. Journey, 40,000 without the extra stuff, but she also had a pre-existing relationship with the family. So those are helpful. Can the carrier ever refuse to release the baby?
So the carrier can refuse to release the baby, but if we're in a state where the contract is enforceable and we have a pre-birth order, it won't work. She can say whatever she wants, but the hospital that she gives birth at, if they have a copy of it, will give the baby to the intended parents. The problem is, and this has never happened to me, but if she really wanted to keep the baby and she decided that she was gonna go to Michigan and deliver, we might have to go to court to get the baby back, right? Because Michigan, it's not enforceable. So that did happen in a case once. That was not a case that came through our office, but it's possible it could happen.
And the part of New York State was that previously the woman delivering the baby was on the birth certificate, and so she's the mom. The contracts were not enforceable in New York, so that was one of the worries, essentially, correct?
Correct, yes. I mean, most carriers don't want another baby, right? So if you have a properly screened carrier, they're not going to want your genetic child when they have a bunch of their own. That's why I like them to already have a baby, because if they have their own babies, they're more likely not to want yours.
And Michigan, how many days does she have to change her mind? What's the laws in Michigan? Any specific?
Yes, they are specific, but I don't know that offhand. And you would have to go through a judge to terminate her rights. I don't know how long it takes to get in to see a judge in Michigan.
But you could get on the website to Melissa Brisman and make a free consultation if you have these more questions. I'm sure you have a lot on your website to answer many of these things. As you said, the financial needs of the process are there. And
we also have scholarships on our website too, links to all the carrier scholarships. If you go under independent resources, there's about 15 places that give scholarships for carriers. So if people have a financial need, the one thing I could tell you is if you are in a relationship and already have one child with somebody, usually you won't get the scholarship. It's usually reserved for people who haven't had a baby yet.
Got it. Hello, Bill, again, and thank you very much. We appreciate everything. And Yalitza, thank you very much. And we are going to work on getting the Facebook, the Instagram, the YouTube translated. So, and also for those that are hard of hearing or can't hear, that they can get the translation. So I'm working on those things right now. Hopefully in the next several months, we'll be able to bring that on. Minimum age to be a surrogate?
We don't take anyone below 21, but I can tell you we don't have too many 21-year-olds. And usually, if they are in their 20s, usually, not always, they tend to be from the South. People get married earlier in the South, statistically. They have their families earlier, because we like to see people done with their family and a stable relationship. We don't have too many 25-year-olds up here done with their family.
Yes. I'm just seeing if there's any other questions that seem important. There was one question about her dosing. Oh, I know. Let's see. Razan, you got to call the team tomorrow, and we can help you with your dosing, by the way. And again, Stacey Ann and Melissa, do you have anything else to add to the process? Then been a lot of good questions tonight.
Yeah, no, I always tell people, try to hang in there, keep the faith, and get as much information as you can, because, there are ways to make it happen even on a limited budget.
Well, and there are lots of ways to do this. I always say you have to ask, and if you don't ask, nothing happens. And asking is really important. And there's so much help out there. We at CMI Fertility continue to work to make it affordable. I know Melissa Brisman helps to work on that also. Then really, I think you realize that things are much more affordable than you think, and don't give up. Let's see. Dr. Isaacson does a lot with Asherman's, by the way, and we too at CMI Fertility do Asherman's, but Dr. Isaacson is really awesome. Let's see. I know about AMH, low AMH. I've seen low AMHs. I have a patient today, by the way, Kelly, I talked to from Colorado, AMH 0.037. She did a natural IVF, no medications, trigger retrieval, one egg, a normal embryo on PGS. So it's certainly possible. We need to talk more and more about natural cycles in the process. All right. Let's see, Melissa, anything else? And thank you very, very much. We appreciate Penny and Jake, Penny on your team and Jake on my team for bringing this all together. Again, where can they find you again, Melissa?
I tried to put it, but I think since it's in the private chat, I can't link it into the comments. But you can go to reproductivepossibilities.com or reproductivelawyer.com or melissabrisman.com. Brisman is Brisman. I noticed a couple people had it because if you put the wrong spelling, it won't come up.
And I know that Penny and Jake were in the background to help get your stuff. A link on our website to Melissa Brisman's Reproductive Possibilities. Yes.
Yes.
And we're really grateful to everyone for joining us. We'll see you all, let's see, Thursday at 4. I should be there on YouTube and Facebook. We're going to do our Instagram on Sundays at 10 a.m. And thank you very much, Melissa, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Good luck to everyone.
All right, good luck and God bless everyone. Thank you.